She asked me to tie her shoes 3 times that morning. I didn't think anything of it at first. 7-year-olds forget things. They get distracted. They're still learning. But by the 3rd time, when I knelt down and looked up at her face, something stopped me. Her eyes weren't on her shoes. They were on the door, watching it. The way a deer watches the edge of a tree line. I'm a 2nd grade teacher at Millbrook Elementary in Dayton, Ohio. I've been teaching for 11 years. In that time, I've had kids come to school without breakfast, without a winter coat, without anyone who remembered to pack their lunch. You develop instincts. You learn to read the things children can't say out loud. My name is Ted Harmon, and I want to tell you about a little girl named Nora. She joined my class in October, 3 weeks into the school year. New student, mid-semester. Her file said she'd transferred from a school district outside Columbus. Her mother, a woman named Diane, came in to fill out the enrollment paperwork. She was polite, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who apologized before she asked a question. She had a boyfriend named Russell who waited in the parking lot the entire time. I could see him through the window of the main office. He didn't come in. He just sat there in a black pickup truck with the engine running, watching the entrance. I didn't think much of that either. People are people. Relationships are complicated. I had a class of 22 kids and a reading assessment due by Friday. Nora was quiet. Not shy quiet, where a kid slowly opens up over a few weeks and starts raising her hand and making friends. This was a different kind of quiet, careful. Like she was always measuring how much space she was allowed to take up. She sat in the 2nd row, 3rd desk from the left, and she never once put her elbows on the table. Not once in 8 months of school. She was bright, though. Her writing was startlingly good for her age. When I assigned a journal prompt in November, "What is your favorite place?" most kids wrote about Disney World or their grandma's house or the swimming pool at the Y. Nora wrote 4 sentences about the public library 2 blocks from her apartment. She wrote, "The library is quiet and no one yells there. And the librarian, Mrs. Paulson, lets me sit in a corner chair by the fish tank for as long as I want. That is my favorite place because I feel like I belong to myself there." I read that sentence and sat with it for a long time. I belong to myself there. I put the journal in my desk drawer instead of in the return pile. I kept thinking about it. By January, I'd noticed a pattern. Every Monday, Nora came in depleted. Not tired like a kid who stayed up too late. Depleted, like something had been taken from her over the weekend. She'd sit at her desk and stare at the surface of it for the first 20 minutes of class. I tried to give her easy wins on Mondays. Called on her for questions I knew she could answer. Let her be the one to feed our class fish, Gerald, because I'd noticed that was the only time she smiled without thinking about it first. Her drawings changed in February. We did a unit on feelings, identifying emotions, drawing them out. The usual 2nd grade emotional literacy work. Most kids drew happy suns and sad raindrops. Nora drew a house. It was technically accomplished for a 7-year-old. But the house had 1 room on the ground floor with all the windows, sunny and normal looking. And then there was a separate structure she drew attached to the side. Smaller, no windows, darker pressure on the pencil, a single door with what looked like a lock on the outside. She drew a small stick figure inside that 2nd room. Alone, I sat down across from her at her desk and kept my voice completely even. "Can you tell me about this picture, Nora?" She looked at it. Then she looked at me. "That's the thinking room," she said. "Who goes in the thinking room? Kids who aren't good. And who decides if a kid is good or not good?" She didn't answer that. She just picked up a blue crayon and started coloring over the smaller structure until it disappeared. That afternoon, I called the school counselor, a woman named Patricia Webb, and told her what I'd seen. She said she'd schedule a check-in with Nora that week. She did. Nora told her everything was fine at home. Russell was her mom's friend. He was nice. She liked her room. Patricia told me kids sometimes need more than one conversation. Give it time. I gave it 3 more weeks. In that time, I watched Nora flinch when I dropped a textbook by accident. I watched her spend an entire recess sitting on the bench near the door instead of playing, just watching the street. I watched her eat her lunch so fast, like someone might take it, even though she had the same packed lunch every day and no one had ever touched it. Then came the Tuesday in March. I was straightening up the reading corner after school. Most kids had gone. The after-school program kids were in the gym. I thought I was alone in the classroom. But when I moved the beanbag chair in the corner, I found Nora sitting behind it, pressed against the wall, her knees to her chest, her backpack still on. Nora. I kept my voice calm. "Hey, you're missing the bus." She looked up at me. And for a second, just a second, her face did something I'd never seen it do before. It crumpled. "I don't want to go home," she whispered. I sat down on the floor across from her, not standing over her. Eye level. "Can you tell me why?" She shook her head hard. "Is someone hurting you?" She went completely still. "Nora, I'm your teacher. My job is to keep you safe. Whatever you tell me right now, I am going to believe you. Do you understand?" Her lips pressed together so tight they went white. And then she said so quietly I had to lean in to hear it. "The garage is where Russell takes me when Mommy goes to work." The floor dropped out from under me. I kept my voice steady. "I have no idea how." "Okay. You're safe right now. I've got you. Can you tell me anything else?" She shook her head again. "He said if I told anyone, Mommy would go away to a hospital place and I'd have to live with strangers." There it was. The same architecture of silence that abusers build around their victims. Shame, plus isolation, plus a specific threat calibrated to what that particular child fears most. In Nora's case, losing her mother. In a 7-year-old's case, that threat was the whole world. "I need to make a phone call, okay? You're going to sit right here with me, and I'm going to stay with you the whole time. You are not in trouble. You did nothing wrong." She nodded. Her hands were shaking. I called the front office and asked them to radio the after-school supervisor to let them know Nora would be late. Then I called Patricia Webb. Then Patricia called the Dayton Police Department. Then everything got very large and very official very fast, in the way that these things do once they are finally in motion. A detective named Walter Greer arrived within 40 minutes. He was a big man, quiet-voiced, which helped. He had a Buckeyes lanyard and a way of sitting that made him look like somebody's grandfather. Nora didn't talk to him right away, but she watched him. And after about 15 minutes of him just being calm in the room, not pushing, not asking anything, she started answering his questions in small, careful sentences. Diane was called into the school. She arrived pale and confused and immediately started saying there must be a mistake, that Russell was good with Nora, that she'd never seen anything that gave her concern. Her voice was steady, but her hands were pulling at the strap of her purse over and over. Walter Greer asked her where Russell was right now. She said at home, probably. Their apartment. Greer excused himself to make a call. I sat with Diane in the hallway while Nora was with the school counselor and a second detective who'd arrived, a woman named Detective Flores. Diane kept saying she would have known. She would have known. I didn't say anything. I'd seen enough in 11 years to understand that the people who say that the loudest are often the people whose own survival required them to not know. I also knew something else. Diane was afraid of Russell. I'd seen it the one time he'd walked Nora in after a dentist appointment. The way Diane moved around him, the way she answered his questions before he finished asking them. That was not the body language of a woman in a healthy relationship. That was the body language of someone managing a threat. What happened over the next 6 hours? I only know in pieces because I wasn't part of most of it. What I do know, the police went to the apartment. Russell was there. When they told him they were investigating a complaint involving a minor, he asked for a lawyer immediately, which Walter Greer told me later was often itself a telling response when the complaint in question supposedly came out of nowhere. They found items in a locked cabinet in the garage. I won't describe them. Greer described them to me in the clinical language that law enforcement uses, and even stripped of all emotional color. What he described made me have to sit down. Nora was placed in emergency protective custody that night. Diane was not charged initially, but she was told she could not return to the apartment and could not be alone with Russell. A DCS caseworker named Andrea took the lead on Nora's placement. Diane asked to speak to me before she left the building that night. We stood in the hallway outside my classroom, the fluorescent lights doing that thing they do at night where they make everything look more exhausted. "Did she tell you how long?" Diane asked me. I told her what Nora had said, that I didn't know how long. Diane put her hand over her mouth, and then she said something I'll never forget. She said, "I kept telling myself the garage was his workshop. He said it was his workshop." She looked at me. "I didn't go in there. He told me the clutter would bother me. I let him tell me that. I didn't know what to say to her. There wasn't a right thing. I just said, "She's safe now." Diane cried then, not dramatically, just steadily, like a pipe that's been under pressure for too long. Russell was arrested the following morning after the evidence from the garage was processed and a warrant was issued. The charge was aggravated child sexual abuse. He'd been in Nora's life for 14 months. Nora had turned 6 4 weeks after he moved in. The weeks that followed were hard in ways I hadn't anticipated. The investigation opened up. DCS and law enforcement found communications on Russell's phone that suggested this was not the first child he targeted. There was a prior complaint from another city, another relationship, filed and then withdrawn when the mother recanted. 3 years earlier, I thought about that for a long time. 3 years of a different child carrying what Nora had been carrying. And I thought about all the small things I'd noticed and explained away in those early months. The careful posture, the Monday depletion, the sentence about belonging to herself at the library. I was asked to give a statement. I gave it twice. The second time was to a child advocacy attorney preparing the prosecution, and she told me that my documentation. I had started keeping written notes in January, dates and observations, nothing that rose to the level of a mandatory report at that point, but a paper trail nonetheless would likely be important in establishing a pattern of behavior and Nora's state of mind over time. I was glad I'd written things down. I was angry that I hadn't written them sooner. The question I kept coming back to was whether I'd waited too long. The drawing in February. The flinching. The bench at recess. Every time I added those up in my head, the answer felt like yes, I waited too long. My supervisor, Principal Lee, told me that mandatory reporter training exists precisely because these distinctions are genuinely hard to make, and that the evidence I saw prior to March did not meet the legal threshold for a report. That I had done what I could do with what I had. I know she was right. I still go over it. Diane cooperated fully with investigators. She was not charged. What came out through the investigation was that Russell had been systematically isolating her from her own mother, monitoring her phone, controlling their finances, and making her financially dependent on him over the course of their relationship. The prosecutor's office connected her with a domestic violence advocate. She started attending a support group. She cut off contact with Russell entirely and made a statement to police about specific incidents of his behavior she'd dismissed or explained away. I think about what it took for her to say those things out loud, about the particular courage of admitting that you looked away. Nora was in foster care for 6 weeks while DCS completed their assessment of Diane's home situation and support network. During that time, Nora was allowed supervised visits with her mother twice a week. Andrea, the caseworker, told me that Nora always asked 2 things at the end of each visit. Is Russell coming back? And is Mommy okay? Both questions broke something in me when I heard them. Nora was permitted to continue attending Millbrook during this period. That was not guaranteed. Foster placement can mean school transfers, but Andrea fought to keep her placement stable because consistency mattered for kids in trauma. I'm grateful for that decision more than I can say. Having her in class during those weeks was strange and necessary for both of us, I think. She needed somewhere that was exactly the same as it had always been. Same desk, same fish named Gerald, same routine. I needed to see her every day to verify she was okay with my own eyes. She was not okay, in the honest sense of the word. She had nightmares. Her foster mother, a woman named Patricia Soto, who had been doing this work for 9 years and had the kind of calm steadiness that can only come from having seen a lot of hard things, told me Nora woke up multiple times a night and sometimes couldn't be in a room with the door closed. She started seeing a trauma therapist, Dr. Kim, twice a week. But she was also, in the important sense, still herself. She still fed Gerald with that quiet, focused attention she always gave it. She still wrote in her journal with a concentration that made her stick her tongue out slightly. One afternoon in April, about 3 weeks after everything had happened, she came in and put a drawing on my desk before class. She didn't say anything about it. Just set it down and went to her seat. It was a drawing of a classroom. My classroom. The reading corner. Gerald's tank. The windows. And at the front of the room, a stick figure with a mustache. I'd had a mustache since February, a fact the class found endlessly entertaining, standing next to a smaller stick figure. The small figure had a speech bubble. It said, "You believed me." I kept that drawing in my desk for the rest of the school year. I looked at it on the days when I couldn't stop thinking about February. Diane got Nora back in late April. DCS required a safety plan, which included regular check-ins, individual therapy for Diane, family therapy for both of them, and a formal no-contact order between Russell and anyone in their household. Diane's mother, who lived in Springfield, had come to stay with them, which helped. The night before Nora came back to live with her mother, Diane called me. She called my cell, which I'd given her early on. She asked if she could come by the school the next day and walk Nora in herself for the first time in months, if that was okay with me. I said of course. She brought Nora in at 7:45 the next morning before most of the other kids arrived. Nora walks through the classroom door and immediately went to Gerald's tank and just stood there looking at the fish for a full minute, like she was checking that everything was still where she'd left it. Then she looked at me. "Hi, Mr. Harmon." "Hi, Nora. How are you feeling?" She considered this seriously, the way she considered everything. "Okay," she said. Like, mostly okay. That was the most honest answer I'd received about anything in a long time. The trial was the part I dreaded most. Nora did not have to testify in open court. Ohio allows child witnesses to give testimony via closed-circuit video in certain cases, and the prosecution successfully argued for that accommodation. Dr. Kim spent months preparing Nora. I wasn't in the room when she gave her statement. I sat in the hallway outside the courthouse on a Tuesday in October and waited. Russell pleaded not guilty. His attorney argued that Nora had been coached, that Diane had manufactured the accusation as leverage in a custody dispute. There was no custody dispute. They weren't married, but the defense threw it at the wall anyway. They argued that the items found in the garage were legal and unrelated to Nora. They argued that the prior complaint from 3 years earlier had been investigated and cleared. The forensic interviewer's testimony dismantled most of that. Nora's account had been consistent across every interview in the specific way that genuine disclosures are consistent. Same core facts, natural variation in peripheral details, the vocabulary and phrasing of a 7-year-old rather than a coached script. Medical examination corroborated the abuse. He was convicted on 3 counts of child sexual abuse. The sentencing judge, a woman named the Honorable Patricia Dunn, gave him 32 years. Given his age, 44, the parole board would have discretion after serving 85% of the sentence. His attorney immediately announced an appeal. I sat in that courtroom and watched him be let out. He didn't look at Nora. He looked at Diane, and the look he gave her was the most chilling thing I saw in that entire proceeding. It was the look of someone who considers you their property and is simply noting that you've been misplaced. Diane didn't look away from him. I watched her hold his gaze until the door closed. It was the bravest thing I saw that entire year, in a year that had a lot of contenders. By the time Nora started 3rd grade at a different school, Diane had decided she needed a fresh start in a new classroom. She was what Dr. Kim called in active recovery, which means neither healed nor broken, but somewhere in the realistic incremental middle. She still saw Dr. Kim monthly. She still had nights that were hard, but she had also, according to Diane, started asking to have a friend over after school, which was new. She'd started caring about what sneakers she wore, which was very new. She'd started correcting Diane's grammar during dinner, which apparently was a habit she'd picked up from a year in my class, and which Diane found both irritating and deeply reassuring. Diane texted me a photo on Nora's first day of 3rd grade. Nora was standing on the front steps of their apartment in a purple backpack, grinning in a way I'd never once seen her grin during the months she'd been in my classroom. She looked like a different kid, not because the hard things had gone away, but because she was finally visibly taking up the space she was entitled to. I stared at that photo for a long time. I keep it in my phone. On the hard days, I look at it. I want to tell you something about mandatory reporting because I think people misunderstand it. The law in Ohio, like in most states, requires teachers, counselors, doctors, coaches, a long list of people to report reasonable suspicion of abuse. Not proof, not certainty, suspicion. The bar is not, I am sure something bad is happening. The bar is, I have reasonable cause to believe something bad might be happening. I met that bar in February. I have to be honest about that. I told myself I was waiting for more clarity. I told myself one conversation with the school counselor covered it. I told myself the drawing could mean a lot of things. I told myself I wasn't sure enough. I was sure enough. I just didn't want to be. Not because I didn't care about Nora. I cared about her enormously, but because making a report means starting something that can't be stopped, means possibly being wrong, means potentially damaging a family on the basis of a child's drawing and a gut feeling. Those fears are real. They're also not good enough reasons to wait. If I had called DCS in February, Nora would have been protected 6 to 8 weeks earlier. In the life of a 7-year-old being abused, 6 to 8 weeks is not nothing. I know that. I'll know it for the rest of my career. What I want anyone reading this to understand is that the discomfort of making a report, the awkwardness, the fear of being wrong, the worry about what it will do to the family, that discomfort is yours to carry, not the child's. When you hesitate, you're protecting your own comfort at the expense of a kid who has no one else making the call. That's the math. It's uncomfortable math. It's the right math. If you're a teacher or a coach or a pediatrician or a neighbor or anyone who spends time around children, know the signs: sudden withdrawal, fear of specific people or places, age-inappropriate knowledge of adult things, regression, a child who seems to be always bracing for something, a child who eats too fast, a child who never puts their elbows on the table. Trust the thing in your chest that says something is wrong. Don't explain it away because it's inconvenient. Make the call. You can be wrong, and the child will be fine. You can be wrong, and the child will be saved. There is no version of this calculation where making the call is the wrong answer. Nora is 9 now. She plays soccer on Saturdays. She wants to be a veterinarian, which does not surprise me even slightly, given the way she used to look at Gerald. She told her mother last year that her favorite memory of 2nd grade was the day she fed the fish, and I let her name the new one, a fat blue betta we got in March, who she named Captain Sirius. Captain Sirius is still alive. He lives on my windowsill next to a photo of Nora on her first day of 3rd grade in a purple backpack, grinning like she owns the place. She does. She owns all of it. She just needed someone to stop explaining away what they already knew and say so. I'll spend the rest of my career making sure I'm that person a little faster next time. I've been turning this over in my mind for 2 years now, and I keep landing on the same uncomfortable place. The things we look away from don't disappear. They just keep happening without us. That's the part nobody tells you about working with kids. You don't usually miss the signs because you're careless. You miss them because seeing them clearly means you have to do something, and doing something is terrifying. Making that call means starting a chain of events you cannot control, and there is no version of that process that is comfortable for anyone, including you. So your brain offers you alternatives. It says, this could mean a lot of things. It says, one conversation with a counselor is probably enough. It says, you're not sure enough yet. I wasn't. Not sure. I was afraid of being sure. Nora carried that for 6 to 8 weeks longer than she needed to because I kept choosing my own comfort over her safety. That's not a judgment I'm making lightly. It's just the accurate description of what happened. The drawing in February was clear enough. The flinching was clear enough. A 7-year-old who writes that her favorite place is somewhere she belongs to herself. That's clear enough if you're willing to let it be. What I've learned slowly and not easily is that integrity isn't about grand decisions made in obvious moments. It's about what you do in the small ones when you're tired and uncertain, and the easier path is just to wait a little longer. Every time I waited, I was making a choice. I just wasn't calling it that. There's something that happens when you finally act, though. When you stop negotiating with yourself, and you just do the thing you already know needs doing. Nora didn't need a perfect system or a flawless chain of institutions to save her. She needed one adult to sit down on the floor at eye level and say, I believe you. That's it. 11 years of teaching. All that training and curriculum and professional development, and it came down to sitting on a classroom floor and meaning what I said. Diane had to find her own version of that same thing. She had to look at what she'd explained away and call it what it was. That took more courage than I think people recognize because for her the cost was immediate and total. Her relationship, her housing, her entire constructed life. She did it anyway, not because she had some extraordinary strength I don't have, because she loved her daughter more than she feared the collapse of the lie she'd been living inside. Russell made his choices too. 14 months of them, systematic and deliberate. There is a logic to consequence, not divine, not cosmic, just the ordinary arithmetic of actions compounding over time until they reach a point that cannot be walked back. He is serving 32 years because of choices he made, one after another, knowing what he was doing. Cause and result. That's all it is. What I want to carry forward, what I try to teach my students even when they're too young to understand it in those terms, is this. The person you are is built out of what you do when it costs something. Not what you say you believe, what you actually do. Nora was brave enough to say the things she'd been threatened into silence over, to a teacher she'd known for 5 months, on a Tuesday afternoon when she was 7 years old. If she could find that, I can make the phone call. I can write the notes. I can sit on the floor. She's 9 now. She plays soccer. She named a fish Captain Sirius. She's going to be fine, not because the world made it easy for her, but because she was honest when honesty cost her everything she knew. And one adult was finally paying attention. I hope to keep earning that.